There is a challenge for the Republican primary. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to give their opening remarks. Mr. Pearson has not been able to show up, but the remaining 3 candidates will be able to speak today. We'll begin with Mr. Ray Bly. You have 30 seconds for your opening remarks, Mr. Bly. And the timekeeper is right in front, and you have a microphone.
Good evening or afternoon. My name is Raymond Bly. I'm running for the U.S. Congress, District 7, for many reasons. First off, Vietnam veterans have not been treated fairly, and the veterans coming back today have not been treated fairly by our VA. We refuse to say this disease and that disease is related to Agent Orange. Second off, I'm running for my wife. How can a court take your wife away of 45 years against her will, incarcerate her without her committing a crime in a nursing home that killed her?
You're fine.
This is what happened to me in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bly. Next opening remarks will be given by Mr. Richmond Davis.
Hello, my name is Richmond Davis. How many Republicans are there here? 2, 3? All right, it looks like I got an educational task ahead here. I am a proud Republican. I'm an attorney, and I am a Vietnam combat veteran. I am running because I want to emphasize traditional Republican principles of limited government, lower taxes, and national defense, which have made this country strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. William Newton.
Good afternoon. My name is William T. Newton. I'm running for the Congressional 7, and I'm a constitutional conservative. The reason why I am running is because we've had approximately 30 years or more of the same representation in the 7th District, and quite frankly, it's been a hopeless failure. It's about time that a constitutionalist serves in this position, and I aim to be that person. I'm currently serving on a Republican Central Committee for 3rd District in Baltimore County, and I'm very well known in the party.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. You can address some of that in your closing.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will begin our question session. If you would like to respond to the question, please hold up your card or your hand so I can call on you in the order in which you are seen. You will have 1 minute for each response. A timekeeper sitting in the front row will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your 1 minute is up. I will begin with question 1. It's possible we need another bridge across the Chesapeake Bay. We have bridges and infrastructure that need attention in all parts of the state. How should Congress prioritize these infrastructure needs? Who would like to go first? Mr. Bly.
We definitely do, because I fished in Euros for decades with my wife. And it's a nightmare to get across the bay a lot of Saturday, Sunday mornings.
You need to use your microphone, Mr. Bly.
Sorry about that. I'm usually loud enough that everybody can hear me anyway. But we need another 3-lane bridge, or add at least 1 lane, and then put automatic toll things on, like they have on this new highway to go to Gaithersburg from Beltsville, where it automatically bills your card. So there's no toll booths anymore. Make it quicker. Going from 3 lanes down to 2 to go across the bridge is a nightmare. And to put them on the other bridge on head-on traffic is very, very dangerous. I've seen so many close accidents on that bridge. The federal government should get in and help finance this. But the toll should have been able to pay for it by now with all the profits it's made from it.
Thank you, Mr. Bly. Mr. Newton.
Hi. I believe this is more or less a local issue other than funding on the federal side. I'd be more than willing to listen and work with any local stakeholders on this. More importantly, I'd like to balance the federal requirement or the state's needs versus private property rights. As a constitutionalist, I believe property rights are sacrosanct and they must take precedent over everything else, including development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
There are so many issues that face our country. I have to confess, I don't know the answer to this question. What I think a representative should do is have an open mind and view it from the perspective, my perspective is as a conservative, and do what's best for all concerned. So I think it's important that a representative know what he's talking about before he utters an opinion. And I don't know the answer right now.
Okay, we'll go on to question 2. Do you feel confident our electoral system protects the individual voter and is free from outside interference, and why? Mr. Newton.
Again, I am the current chairman of the Maryland Republican Election Integrity Committee. We have the only report, national report, that points to the problems with the state of Maryland's elections. I personally don't think there's any more foreign intervention in our elections. I think our problem is more on a state level and the fraud and corruption that's within our state. Newton for Congress.com has all the details. Thank you.
Mr. Bly?
When I ran for U.S. Senate back in 2006, I was so outrageous by fraud in voting that I filed a federal lawsuit. It didn't go anywhere. Everybody's got immunity. But it made a point. Corruption of dead people voting, illegals voting, people not even in the state anymore still voting is getting to be ridiculous. We need to keep updating our records before each election cycle and make sure that only people that's allowed to vote can vote and do vote. We need to bring out people to vote too, because half Americans don't vote anymore. It does make a big difference, that one vote. Ask him about the last election. He won by a couple hundred and then he lost by a couple of hundred. So in the primary. So thank you. Ray Bly for U.S. Congress.
Mr. Davis.
Referencing a comment made by the preceding panel, I don't believe that we have a problem with voter suppression. I think it's a very reasonable concern to require that before one exercise a very important constitutional right, that one be properly identified as a registered voter. Simple as that.
Thank you all. Now candidates will have 30 seconds for their closing statements in reverse alphabetical order. So we will begin with Mr. Newton.
All the quicker to get me off stage. I'd like to say that Newton for Congress.com, you can find all you need to know about me. I'm currently the 3rd Council Manager District, Baltimore County Republican Central Committee member. And also, I was a recipient of Baltimore County Minority Advisory Council Humanitarian Community Service Award, and currently, as I stated, chairman of the Maryland Election Integrity Committee. It's a nonpartisan investigatory group. I would like to say, and I'm prepared for this, and taking a little poetic license with one of Ronald Reagan's quotes, I'd like to simply say, I want you all to know that I will not make age an issue in this campaign. I'm not going to exploit the for political purposes. My opponent's advanced age
Mr. Newton.
Experience, and I thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you for your attention this morning. And I address my comments now to the handful of Republicans present. I hope you'll vote for me. Yes, I'm running in the primary because in order to I have to run in the primary in order to face Elijah Cummings. That's my target. I want to establish the very strong credentials of a traditional conservative Republican, which I am, and I hope you'll support me in the primary so I can have that opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Bly.
I got my wife here, even though she's deceased, because of the state. If you want to know anything about me, my life history is on my Facebook page at Ray Bly. Every night I'm on live at 7:30 to tell you everything, whether it's about race, religion, abortion, you name it. I don't just say better schools, lower taxes, smaller government, the main Republican platform. I tell you where I stand on this stuff. I'm the only candidate that does, which gets me into trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Bly, and thank you all. There is a challenge for the Democratic primary in District 7. Unfortunately, one of the candidates, Elijah Cummings, was unable to join us. Each candidate here today will have 30 seconds to give their opening remarks. We will do that in alphabetical order, and we will begin with Anthony Carter Sr.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Let me start again.
Just try again. Make sure we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. Hello?
Yes.
Yes. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters today in giving me this opportunity. My name is Anthony Carter, and my past, I was a firefighter for Baltimore City, and before that I was a police officer providing the service to Baltimore City. And my family has always been in the service for over 60 years, providing service for caring for other people. And the reason why I'm here, I want to represent the state of Maryland and to bring the vision that I hear even in this audience. We want to bring America together.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
John Moser.
Hi, I'm John Moser. I decided that I wanted to run because I largely wanted to do economic things. There are a lot of homeless, a lot of hungry in the United States, and I had developed a policy to make the Social Security Administration's programs permanently solvent because we keep hearing they're going insolvent. But in part of that, I actually designed a sort of collective risk-sharing program called a universal dividend, which is to support families. It basically provides a part of all of our income as a baseline, as a sort of a basic income, and that helps rebuild our economies.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. Mr. Smith, Charles Smith.
I shall speak on my record. I enlisted when I was 17, volunteered for Vietnam. I served as a combat engineer in the Company B 39th Engineer Battalion, 1st Armored Cavalry in the 1st Corps. I got a battlefield commission. I was allowed to go to OCS in the Maryland National Guard, and I was XO to class in 76, class 19. I was advisor to Major General Hugh Hodges, personal aide. I was ordered back to active duty.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Let's begin our question session. If you would like to respond, please hold up your card so that I can call on one of you in the order in which you are seen, or your hand will work as well. All right? You will have 1 minute for each response, and a timekeeper is sitting in the front row to let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your minute is up. I will tell you that you don't need to stand up because you're being filmed, and you actually look very nice the way you are. So I think everyone will be able to see you clearly and hear you if you stay seated. All right? First question. It's possible we need another bridge across the Chesapeake Bay. We have bridges and infrastructure that need attention in all parts of the state. How should Congress prioritize these infrastructure needs? We'll start with Mr. Moser.
So the Constitution gives Congress certain explicit powers, and one of them is the power to tax and spend for the general welfare. The general welfare, of course, would include infrastructure projects, so it is important that the federal government look to the states, find what infrastructure would generally improve our economy, and provide for those things. Now, that doesn't mean that, they can spend infinitely, but, we had the red line that we were going to build. The federal government was going to give $900 billion towards that. It was a very large project. That has since been set aside. These are the kinds of things that we need to work on, and it is largely a responsibility of the federal government to help the states with these things and all kinds of infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. Who wants to go next? Mr. Carter.
In this question, I think it's up to the voters of Maryland. As a congressman and representing the citizens of Maryland, if they decide that a bridge needs to be built, the Chesapeake needs to be built, a new bridge, I will find the money in Congress as a representative to get that money for the Marylanders. Infrastructure is something that normally it crosses party lines, that there's agreement that if something in infrastructure needs to be built, the safety of the public, we normally come together. So I agree that any money that needs to be spent on infrastructure, I will get the money for the Maryland taxpayers. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
I should speak again on my record. While I was in the National Guard, I was a personal advisor to Governor Hughes and Governor Schaefer. I provided advice, and as a general officer in the Corps of Engineers, I helped to build cannon yards and the Raven Stadium. I received my recognition by 3 governor citations for my work and my part in that endeavor. I also was part of the Virginia, New Jersey, Maryland pact that they made for the Chesapeake Bay. The East Coast was my area of responsibility. I was ordered back to active duty as a sergeant major of the Army, working under President Reagan. And when I retired as a 4-star when I came back to the state of Maryland as a National Guardsman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Question number 2. Do you feel confident our electoral system protects the individual voter and is free from outside interference, and why? Mr. Moser.
So our electoral system actually doesn't let people's voice really be heard. It's not just protecting from the outside, but you actually have to have a strong electoral system that can resist any kind of attacks and can also represent people. So people have talked about getting rid of the electoral college, but a first past the post system doesn't really work. If we had a system that elected from the Smith set, which is the set of the smallest set of candidates who in a one-on-one election with every candidate outside that set would beat them, that would actually elect someone basically we all can most agree on. Things like open primaries and fusion voting where parties can nominate candidates from other parties. So you may have like the Green and the Democratic candidates appeal to each other's party, so they both nominate this guy and he has both names on it. It lets the voters send a message based on party, based on third parties, and it gives us more ability to speak to our government and to say, yeah, we need you to change how you're running our policies, or else we're going to make change.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
I have personal experience with the election board. I was a Republican election judge for 21 years before I changed to Democrat. I personally, in East Baltimore, under the Fort Worthington Elementary School, and I was personally responsible for turning in the complaint against the fraudulent stuff they was doing in the election board, dead voters and all that. And I was the one that started it off. But I filed the first complaint with Mr. Jones down at the election board in Baltimore City.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Question number 3. How do you encourage talented young people? I'm sorry. I checked off your name before I called on you. Mr. Carter, you may go.
To that question, no, I don't have a lot of confidence, and I'm very concerned. Voting is the basic foundation of who we are as American citizens and how we started and the democracy that makes us America. And my concern is with Russia, and that's basically the security aspects of Russia. And we are taking this very lightly, and that can crumble our democracy if a foreign government is engaged in undermining our American Constitution. And yes, and also my other concern is the lack of voter participation. We don't have enough young people involved. As you can look into this audience, there should be a lot more people here today. The cynicism that I see here, the back and forth between Democrat and Republican, it causes this problem in which we have in this audience. And we should all come together and realize we are Americans first. Party is second or third. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Now we'll go to question 3. How do you encourage talented young people to step forward and work and serve in positions in the federal government? Okay, Mr. Moser.
So the way you encourage young people to serve is you get them to serve. We have, things like student government organizations, and we have this talk about things like the Citizens United thing where big PACs and big organizations can influence our government, but those are linkage organizations, and what people don't seem to realize is that community associations, they can build themselves. They can get together and say, well, we need to get everyone in our community to have a voice to speak to connect with candidates, to connect with our representatives. Well, those are democratic organizations, and by being a part of those, you learn to serve in part of a democracy, and these are where the people who are running come from. We come from Democratic clubs, or over on the other side from Republican clubs. We come from community associations. We come from nonpartisan organizations that say we have to do something, and we learn to operate democratically, and then we say, well, we could take this to being a representative, and it's a natural progression from there. So we should work to educate people and involve them more in government to begin with, and then that will bring them to serve more.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. Now we'll go to Mr. Carter.
This question of having more young people involved in our system, it becomes like the earlier candidates spoke upon, is that as adults we must set the example, and we are setting a poor example from the top of the White House to the bottom. And we need to be more of an example for our young people. We have failed on all levels. And my parents always say, when you point one finger, the thumb points back. So if the government is broken, it's our responsibility to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Smith.
I believe the main problem is the voters, they're discontent or disenchanted with the elected officials they have now. The mess that's going on in Washington is really something. There's a lot you could do, but until they elect the right representatives, people in D.C., the voters, they're very perceptive and they're very smart. And I think you're seeing the reason why a lot of them don't step forward is because of the corruption that's going on.
Thank you. Now, each of you will have 30 seconds for closing statements, and we will go in reverse alphabetical order. So we will begin with you, Mr. Smith. You have 30 seconds for a closing. You have 30 seconds for a closing statement. We'll start with you. Yeah, we're going backwards.
Like I said before, I've been in public service since 1967 when I enlisted in the United States Army. I prided myself on being helping the underprivileged. I started a nonprofit service at the Baltimore Housing Developers Corporation. We got the contract from City Hall to renovate all off-site housing authority houses through the tax-exempt numbers that we had.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And now, Mr. Moser.
So I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. There haven't been a lot of candidate forums or even any polling that I've seen in District 7. The questions were interesting. I like to talk a lot about economics, as I said in the beginning. I also have a lot of different policy positions for things like, I've got an entire additional Bill of Rights that I wrote up and suggested for guiding the government. I have things about immigration. There's a lot that I'd like to talk about, but there's not time here. So you can all see my website at johnmoserforcongress.com. And you can find me, contact me, email me. It's going to take a lot more than 30 seconds for me to tell everything about myself. Sorry.
Okay, now we'll end with Mr. Carter.
Yes, I would like to also thank the League of Women Voters. And I have served the citizens of Maryland all my life. My family have served. And that's our belief, is part of being a part of this country and a good citizen is to serve and to care for others first before yourself. And that's what we must get back to, serving others and setting an example. And that's what I want to do, to serve you and to be a good servant. And that is very important for me. And to bring back the values of spirituality, which I believe bringing ethics and morals back in our lives.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Carter. And thank you to all the candidates for District 7.